Good afternoon. I run a company called CrowdFlower, and we're part of a nascent industry that we call crowdsourcing. And I'm genuinely curious, how many people have heard of crowdsourcing? So about half. And that's kind of amazing for a term that was only coined in 2006. So what crowdsourcing means to me is taking thousands of people and having them work together on something important. And I think that this is a huge phenomenon that's changing the world right now. So at my company, we believe in making everyone productive all the time. And every time I give some of these talks, there's people on their laptops, on their iPhones. And I want to give you guys something productive to do if I'm boring you. So I made a website, crowdflower.com/TEDxDU, and you can actually work on useful tasks while you listen to me. And I'm really interested to see what comes out of this. So please, some of you, please, get on your laptops and iPhones and go to this website. I'm going to start with kind of a fun example. This is a task we put up years ago. And there's no prompting. This is exactly the ugly UI that we showed our users, our crowd. And it just said, what do you call these colors? So I don't know, maybe in the upper left, what is that? Gray, brown, beige. And these are the results that came back. We collected hundreds of thousands of labels in a few hours. And we made a tag cloud where the size of the color is how many people said it. So, for example, green is a really popular answer. So you can see green is really big. Something like cerulean is really small, probably too small for you to see it because there's not a lot of painters in the particular crowd that we used. And the hue here is the average of all the colors, all the randomly generated colors that people consider to be green or considered to be blue. And we collected thousands and thousands of data points just basically for fun. And a lot of researchers came to us and they said, you know, we did this before, and you guys aren't scientific. You didn't control for a lot of factors. But, you know, we made our data publicly available. And so lots of people came and did cool stuff with it. So in the upper right, you can see an artist made this fire cloud of color and text. A mathematician in the upper left made like a semantic web of colors. And almost the coolest application was on the bottom, a colorblind engineer made a thing where you could go over pixels on your screen, and it would say this pixel isn't just this mix of red, green, and blue. It's aqua, or it's lavender, so that colorblind people could sort of engage with color-seeing people and see how they think about colors. And so that's a fun example. Day to day, we do real meaningful work for big industries, and this is our supply chain. And I love the supply chain so much, I recently put it on the homepage of our website. And I think this is the future of supply chains, in fact. I'm curious, how many people have read The World is Flat, Thomas Friedman? Wow, more people than have heard of crowdsourcing. That's incredible. And I love Friedman's argument, right? But really, he's saying technology is making it easy to connect San Francisco and Bombay. And that's really important, right? Communication's getting easier, the GDP is rising everywhere, barriers to trade go down, and great things happen. And I totally agree, but I think there's even a bigger phenomenon happening here where we connect Denver with Anchorage, right? And we connect San Francisco with Dadaab, right? We actually put useful real tasks inside refugee camps it goes through a partner, SamaSearch, which is an amazing company that supplies them with infrastructure and netbooks. And why couldn't these smart people do useful stuff for American or European companies? There's really no reason. In fact, right now, part of our supply chain are the people in the audience on their iPhones and laptops who are labeling things for us. So I'm going to talk today about a few examples, which I think is kind of a really new thing, which is how crowdsourcing helps with tragedies. And this is my first example. This is a guy, James Fawcett, who's an amazing person. He was the first person to fly a hot air balloon around the world. And he was always doing dangerous things. And really sadly, he crashed his plane 2 years ago in the desert in Arizona. And no one knew where he crashed it. And so Amazon actually set up a task for their users. Looks a lot like what you see in the slide here. And said, here's a satellite photo taken the day after the plane crashed. Can you tell us if there's a plane in this frame? And they had hundreds of thousands of photos to go through. You can imagine the FAA might hire 1 or 2 people to go through satellite photos of frames and look for airplanes, but it would take them months before they found crashes. But by putting this up and saying, hey, anyone that's worried about James, anyone that wants to volunteer a few minutes of their time, you can do something useful right now. You can look at a few frames. They were able to scour the whole land in days. The sad epilogue is that they didn't happen to find him. When they finally found his crash months later, it turned out it wasn't in the area that they covered with the photos. But I believe that this is a new way that disasters will get treated, and I believe that this will save lives. Another example, there's a company called LiveOps, which is actually a big company you may never have heard of, and they do crowdsourced call centers. So they make it so stay-at-home moms typically can make money working from their home by pressing a button, and now they're a call center operator. Now their home phone is actually used to take calls, take orders, do customer service. And you might say, who really wants this? Well, here's a company that really should use this, right? How could Snuggie have ever predicted the sales they were going to do for that ridiculous blanket with sleeves? Right? I mean, if in their business model they had staffed up an appropriate number of people to take their orders, they would have been laughed at, right? It would have been so wasteful. But they got all these orders, and once the orders were coming in, they had to fulfill them right away. Right, so LiveOps actually offered a solution where they could immediately scale up to the demand that they had. And an even better example, the real example here, is the American Red Cross. Right when Katrina hit, they set up a phone number, 1-800-LOVED-ONES, which was way more popular than they expected. And tons of people called in trying to donate money, and it overwhelmed the people they had on staff to take the calls. They tried to contract it out to an outsourcer, and they said, well, we might be able to set this up in weeks, but even that seems hard. LiveOps had a call center set up in 2 hours taking donations. And they had thousands of operators. Literally, it took millions of dollars in. And it's a testament to what a great business model they have, but also what an amazing group of people we have in this country that everyone wanted to donate in such droves. How could the American Red Cross have known they were about to need a huge call center to take donations? There's no way they could have known that. My final example is Haiti, and this is a picture actually I took in Port-au-Prince, where you can see that the buildings fell down, but remarkably, the telephony infrastructure remained intact. They actually had the cell phones working a few hours after the earthquake hit. And a really smart NGO called Frontline SMS Medic convinced the telcos to set up a short code, 4636, where people could text and say, I have a problem. I need water, I need tents, there's crime. And they started broadcasting on the radio this 4636 number, and then sending the text messages to interested agencies that were on the ground in Haiti in the very early days of right after the earthquake. And because the people in Haiti had no other way to communicate their problems, they started using the service like crazy. And it started to overwhelm how much information the agencies could deal with. And the agencies didn't have enough people that spoke Creole, right? Because how would they know to staff up thousands of Creole speakers? So we worked with a whole bunch of amazing NGOs, too many to name, and we sent these tasks all around the world to the Haitian diaspora. So we had people in Russia translating Creole to English. We had people in Australia translating Creole to English. And the amazing thing was that so many people were working that 24 hours a day, we were able to translate messages from Creole into English within 5 minutes, categorize the messages within 5 minutes, and send them to the right agency so that the Red Cross only got health issues. So they only got things like a woman's pregnant and needs help. And the US Coast Guard got situations where people needed water. And then another company, Ushahidi, stepped in and they started mapping where the problems were. So they made these heat maps of the problems with violence are taking place here, and there's a water issue here. And the State Department actually took notice. And the State Department started sending this information to government agencies on the ground, and they started deploying their volunteers based on these heat maps that were generated by this kind of cabal of small companies that were just creating this thing based on a need. And they said that they had never had so much insight in a disaster situation before. My final example is a totally different kind of crowdsourcing company called Innocentive. And they put contests online. So they say, we'll give $50,000 to the person that can model this data the best, or $100,000 to someone that can come up with an enzyme that does some special thing. And scientists go and they submit ideas. And a few weeks ago, after the oil spill, they set up a task. They said, does anybody have ideas to fix the oil spill problem? And I was just reading this morning, I just added this slide because I was reading this morning that some high school in New Jersey had submitted an idea where they put some kind of fiber in the water and it causes the oil to dissolve. and they were really taking this seriously, and they're talking about it. I don't know if they're actually going to deploy it, but what an amazing thing that high school students in New Jersey were able to run an experiment, send their information to people on the ground trying to fix this oil spill problem, and what an amazing world we live in now, where everyone's connected and everyone can be useful. And why should we assume that cultural issues mean that someone in a refugee camp in Dadaab can't do something useful, or that high school students can't submit a useful scientific prize? There's no reason anymore. So I'm really excited about crowdsourcing, and I think it's changing the world right now. Thanks.